What if one of the most influential figures in all of human history has been fundamentally misunderstood? Today, we're diving into a fascinating text that explores that very possibility. It does this by imagining conversations between Jesus, Paul, and the people who would go on to shape their legacy. Let's get right into it. Just think about that for a second. So much of our world, the foundation of Western civilization, countless wars, the deep faith of billions of people, it all really hangs on how we answer one specific question about one man's identity. But what if the answer that we've all inherited isn't, the one he actually intended? So the source material we're digging into today takes this really unique approach. Instead of just another dry analysis of ancient texts, it imagines what would happen if key figures like Jesus, the Apostle Paul, Emperor Constantine, and Mary Magdalene could all just sit down in a room together and talk it out, face to face. It's a really creative way to explore a seriously profound question. So what is this monumental question? Well, the source we're looking at puts it right up front, loud and clear. And there it is. That's the question that kicks the whole thing off, posed here by Mary Magdalene. It just cuts through 2 millennia of complicated theology with one simple, direct inquiry. Did you want to be seen as God himself, or did we? Did history get it wrong? Now, to even begin to answer a question that big, the text argues that we have to do something really hard. We have to try and go back to the very beginning. We have to put ourselves in the world that Jesus actually lived in. What was culturally possible and what was completely unthinkable for a Jewish teacher in first-century Galilee. The imagined historian and our source makes this absolutely crucial point about context. In that specific time and place, for a Jewish person to claim to be God, well, it wasn't just a radical idea. It was culturally and theologically unthinkable. The entire framework of their faith was about serving God, not becoming him. And then, the source imagines the Apostle Paul himself weighing in. He basically clarifies, look, my writings were meant as pastoral letters. They were symbolic, written for specific communities. But over the centuries, those poetic, pastoral words were taken and hardened into rigid, unbending doctrine, something he claims he never, ever intended. And that brings us to the absolute core statement from the source's Imagine Jesus. It's such a simple, powerful distinction. His purpose, he explains, wasn't to become the new object of worship. It was to reveal a path to God. The whole point was revelation, not replacement. Okay, so if that was the original message, how on earth did things change so dramatically? Well, the source lays this out as a gradual historical shift, a slow journey from a direct, living truth to a formal, inherited tradition. You see, this didn't happen overnight, not at all. It started with a lived message, something passed from person to person orally. But as it moved out into the Greek and Roman world, it started getting interpreted through a completely different philosophical lens. And that led to big councils, like the famous one at Nicaea, which eventually locked it all down into official institutional doctrine. A living message became a rigid system. So why does this happen? The text suggests it taps into something deep in our human nature. You see, a direct truth, well, it requires constant questioning, and that can feel kind of unsettling. But an inherited tradition, that offers the comfort of certainty. All it asks for in return is obedience, and that's a trait that large institutions and entire societies often find very, very appealing. The text points to one specific event as the major turning point in all of this, the Council of Nicaea. This was the moment where belief wasn't just debated anymore. It was voted on, it was standardized, and for the first time on a massive scale, it was politically enforced. In this imagined dialogue, Emperor Constantine basically pulls back the curtain on his real motive. And guess what? It's not theological, it's political. He had a fractured church, and that threatened the stability of the entire Roman Empire. He needed everyone to agree on a single doctrine simply to keep control. And the contrast here is just so stark. While the council was deep in debate over metaphysics, the philosophical nature of being, the imagined Jesus in our source brings it all back to relationship. He says, I never sent you to argue about my nature. I sent you to live a life of love. So we've seen how the message might have changed, but so what? Why does this distinction between being Son of God and being God himself actually matter so much? Well, the source argues that the implications are absolutely profound. Okay, first we have to understand the original term. In its Jewish context, saying someone was a son of something often meant they were like it in character. So a son of peace was simply a peaceful person. That means son of God meant someone who perfectly reflected God's character, someone living in total alignment with his will. It was about a relationship, not a statement of being. And this leads to what might be the single most crucial point in the entire text. If Jesus is seen as God himself, then his life isn't a human path that we can follow. It's a divine performance we can only admire from a distance. It becomes unreachable. And what gets lost? The source argues that what's lost is the very invitation to walk that path yourself. The cost of this one shift, according to the source, is just immense. We lose that invitation to follow. We lose the reachable human example. We lose the sheer courage of his humanity. We even lose the intimacy of that original father-son relationship and the faith's deep connection to its own Jewish roots. It all gets collapsed into a complex metaphysical puzzle. But the source is really, really clear that its goal isn't to diminish anyone's faith. It's actually the complete opposite. This whole exploration is framed as an invitation to look again, and maybe, just maybe, to deepen one's own understanding. The point here isn't to just throw out 2,000 years of history. It's to encourage personal discovery over simply inheriting a belief without questioning it. It's about looking past all the layers of tradition and asking, what was the original voice actually trying to say? The text leaves us with this really empowering thought from its version of Mary Magdalene. It suggests that truth isn't some fragile thing that needs to be protected by layers of doctrine. Instead, it's robust. It's just waiting to be discovered by anyone who's willing to seek it with an open heart. Which, in the end, leaves us with one final question to think about. This whole text we've explored today seems to suggest that the greatest journey isn't just about inheriting a belief, but about discovering a personal understanding. So, what's the difference between those two things for you? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us.